besides training Taiji with my Taiji master and my Taiji brothers, I also, again contacted my friends and check out, what they were up to. I got to meet with Zhang Ming, right, the Song Style Xingyi practitioner, but he was pretty busy at the time, so we got together, had coffee, and that's it. I also contacted Boris, my Russian friend, and then learned that at the time he was no longer training under Ma Laoshi. Instead, he went to Shandong and found a direct disciple lineage from Shan Xiangling, and he was doing 6 harmony mantas in Shandong. At the same time, he has another new master in Beijing called Hong Zhitian, who is one of the most prominent Chuojiao Fanzi master from the Wu Binlou lineage in Beijing. So he was really keen on me meeting his master, so one morning I basically went to, I think it was either Temple of Moon or Temple of Sun, I can't remember exactly. I went to the park and I met with his master Hong Zhitian. I mean, the stuff is good, as far as external martial art goes, and particularly if you want to do Chuojiao Fanzi, then Hong Zhitian is one of the the most authentic teachers that you can find in Beijing. But like I already mentioned, at the time I've already set my mind on just doing Taiji and not be distracted in other lineages and styles anymore. So at the time, although I checked out what they were doing, but I was not interested in learning another style. What's interesting on the day, during my conversation with Hong Zhitian, he was asking me what martial art I have trained in the past, and one of such was, training Banyan Tongbei with Zhang Xinbin. And when I mentioned Zhang Xinbin's name, Hong Zhitian basically said, he recently switched style. He's no longer doing Banyan Tongbei, instead he's doing Wuxing Tongbei. At the time I felt it was quite weird, right? Because, Zhang Xinbin has been known to be the top hand of Banyan Tongbei in Beijing. That's like meaning that he's one of the highest level practitioner of Banyan Tongbei of his generation in Beijing, and he is in his 50s. And in Chinese custom, when you reach that age, you wouldn't switch style that easily because you've already built a lifetime of reputation and respect within this style, right? It's very unnatural for someone of that accomplishment to switch to another style and start from scratch. So it was very weird. He didn't know any more details about it, so I tried to inquire but couldn't find out anything else, but it was always in the back of my mind from that time onwards. Another friend that I contacted was Zhuge Yi, right? He's a friend I met through the Union University Chinese martial art club days. And he was telling me that he met this very highly skilled and impressive Chinese martial art master, and he would like me to meet him. So I also went to check out this master he was talking about, and his name is Ma Yunfang. So he's a master of Ruanshou Tongbei, which is a lesser known branch of the bigger Tongbei family. He also apparently did practice Wuxing Tongbei from the Dongbei branch, right, which is unrelated to the Wuxing Tongbei that I'm currently practicing. And more impressively, he's also a national level boxing coach and used to coach the Liaoning Sheng, which is the Liaoning province provincial boxing team. So I got to meet with him, and then actually, our topic of discussion was evolving around Tongbei. So I was telling him that I first did Banyan Tongbei from my father, the Nujie branch, and then I studied Tongbei from Zhang Xinbin. And funny enough, right, the two is very different, right? I even gave an example. I said in my father's version, we do danshou like this, but in Zhang Xinbin's version, the hand's much shorter, and you have like a body ram rather than whooping your arm like a whip. And then he told me that your father's version is the correct one. That's the original version of Banyan Tongbei, and Zhang Xinbin, he basically changed it. And that's when I actually got the confirmation that Zhang Xinbin learned Yiquan from Li Jianyu and then tried to merge the two because he realized that his Banyan Tongbei was missing structural or destructive power. And in our discussion, he also mentioned that he actually just had a martial gathering that Zhang Xinbin was also present, and he also knows that Zhang Xinbin is now switching over to Wuxing Tongbei rather than doing Banyan Tongbei. And he basically told me that he thinks that's actually a good step, because now he actually will finally loosen up his tension and actually be able to do genuine authentic Tongbei. So basically this is the second time during that trip that I heard about Zhang Xinbin switching from Banyan Tongbei to Wuxing Tongbei. But still, I could not find any more details on why he did it, right? Ma Yunfang 老师 basically just say, he just thinks that Zhang Yiming realized what he was doing was incorrect and therefore found a correct approach. He doesn't know anything more on this incident. Other than that, we also talk about how traditional martial art should handle against Sanda. What should you do against the low muta like low sweep kick, and what to do against the high sweep kick, etc. So suffice to say that was a pretty eventful meeting for me. Now the most interesting master that I met during that trip to China was actually a Yiquan master called Wang Yang 老师. Basically, I have another close friend that I met back in 2003 who was interested in Chinese martial art but actually wasn't training. I basically took her around and showed her to my chainsaw teacher at the time, which is Xu Zhixi 老师. And then in 2008, I also then introduced her to my then Taiji teacher, Zhang 老师, and then which became my Taiji master now. So I basically was showing her around the Beijing martial arts scene whenever I have a chance to spend time in Beijing. But in 2014, it was the other way around. Basically, I was spending time with her and she told me that she actually by chance met this very high level Yiquan master. And I was asking if I was interested in meeting him. And I naturally said yes, because I'm always open to meeting interesting practitioners and masters in Chinese martial arts. And one morning we got to this very far place outside the Beijing city center, and we got to meet this Wang Yang 老师. And upon meeting him, he looks very friendly and he was smiling and joking. And then we basically ate lunch together. Everything was very calm and peaceful. And then we went to his apartment, and then we got to the real purpose of the meeting, which is I want to check out what kind of high-level Yiquan ability he has. So naturally, the best way to test somebody's skill is to have a friendly spar. So that's what we did. And about less than 10 seconds into the spar, he basically did a side tray, right? It's a type of punching Yiquan where you hook a guy's arm and then you punch sideways. And he caught me right on my ribs. And at the time I saw the punch coming, I tried to stop it, but his structural power was so strong and basically knocked my defense away and still hit me on my side. At the moment, I just felt something wasn't right, and so I said, okay, let's stop. But he was like pretty excited at the time, so he didn't want to stop. And then we did some more where but I was already just on the defense. I'm not trying to spar anymore because I'm just concerned about him hurting me again. And then the one punch he caught, it slipped on my lip and actually chipped part of my front tooth. So I was basically bullied by him, count out for like over an hour or maybe 1.5 hours. He had a bed on the one end of his room, and basically every time we engage, he will basically send me out. I'll be falling back and I'll fall on the bed. I'll get up and then he will do something. I'll fall back to the bed. And I actually got tired from just falling on the bed and getting back up. That's how many times I actually fell and get up from the bed. So after he was happy with our exchange, according to him, then we sat down and then we start talking about Yiquan. And he was asking me like what did you learn from your Yiquan teacher, and I showed him the stance, 视力, right, 发拳, power generation, and he told me all of that is wrong. And then so I asked him, okay, then what is the right way? But he didn't quite want to tell me. And and that's kind of normal. It's what I would expect from most of the Chinese masters in China. They are quite secretive about the actual essence of their training. They are not going to just reveal it to anyone, even though that I was referred and taken to him by my close friend who is also his close friend at the time. But even then he refused to actually point out what I was doing wrong. If at the time I didn't meet my Taiji master and I didn't decide to only focus on Taiji, I would actually become asked to become his student. That's how impressive he was. I mean, I can't really say with 100% certainty, but at least to what I can understand, his ability is on par with the Yao brothers. And he's a lot younger than them, right? He was only a couple years older than me. And that actually further sort of depressed me because he's only a few years older than me and he's leagues ahead of me in terms of internal understanding and training. And it further fueled my motivation, to further my own training within my Tai Chi lineage so that I can, one day also reach a better level and not be bullied around by people like him. So when I went back from his place, the next day, then the rib part where he punched me started to be sore. And on the third day, it became very, very sore to a point where I can't use this arm to lift anything. And furthermore, when I laugh or cough, it hurts severely. And when I came back to South Africa, it was so painful. So I basically went to a doctor to check, and the bones were not broken or fractured, and there's no bruise, no swell, no nothing. But for some odd reason, it was just severely painful. And now when I sleep, I can only sleep on one side. I can't sleep on this side. When I get off bed, I have to push myself off with this one arm. I can't get off like a setup because anything that involves using strings hurts severely. And this pain basically lasted for a full month before it just went away. And that just gives you an idea of what kind of damage and power the internal martial art can have. And according to him, which I do believe, he didn't hit me with his full force. That's basically his playing around power, right? He wasn't trying to hurt me. If he did, most likely my rib will be broken and I will have internal bleeding. That's how much destructive power that he can generate from that one punch. And this also kind of gives you an idea that you should not do friendly sparring with Yiquan practitioners, because friendly to them has very different meaning to other martial art practitioners. So when you do decide to cross hand with Yiquan, you basically have to go full out. But if you're not there to hurt them, they will end up hurting you. And obviously that's not exactly worth it, because if you hurt them, then you make an enemy, which is why from that point onwards I just made a rule for myself that I will not do sparring or exchange hand with each practitioner unless I'm ready to become enemies and not to see each other thereafter. And this is just a useful tip or advice that you should remember if you do ever travel within the Chinese martial arts circle. And after I came back from my trip in 2014, like I said earlier, I finally grasped some understanding on what I'm actually training when I'm doing Wuji stance in my Tai Chi lineage. So after that, I was diligently training every day for at least 4 hours, doing just stance. And as I was putting in the hours, then stuff to become more and more apparent to me. A lot of stuff that I couldn't understand previously finally start to click. And naturally, as I planned, the following year I went back to China again for 3 months to train with my Tai Chi master. And since I got nothing else to do in China during that period, I upped my personal training to 6 hours a day, where I do 3 sessions of stance, 2 hours each, and I take about a 30-minute break between each stance. So essentially I spend my entire day in the Purple Bamboo Park. Whether my master is there or not, it doesn't matter. I'm always there every day doing my own training. And when my Tai Chi brothers are free, then I spend time with them, staying at their place, and then we'll train together so that they can further correct me on things that I missed out or forgot about. And here are some pictures that was taken by my Tai Chi brothers and sisters while I was doing training. Like I said, I'm not big on taking photos, so these photos only exist because they were bored and decided to take pictures of me. And here's a photo we taken after a full day of training at my Tai Chi brother's place. And when there's a 3 person in this photo, Guo Jian, Li Jin, Zhang Wei, they are basically the 3 most important disciples from my master. They basically has the most time and made the most progression within our lineage, and is seen by my master as the main disciples that would eventually reach the highest level that he wished his disciples to reach. Well, I also trained very diligently, but due to the fact that I only spent 3 months there, the rest of the year I'm not there, my progression is still relatively slow compared to these 3 Tai Chi brothers. But because I'm in close relationship with them, I spend a lot of time with them when I'm in China, so I was able to catch up slowly on the stuff that I missed out every year. Here's some more pictures taken during some of our meetings, or dinner taken after our full day of training with my master, or some of the pictures that were taken on the day before I leave for South Africa again. So before 2014 and 2016 is when I slowly to understand what my master means by skeletal force, and how that is basically the central element that fuels internal structure. And due to my my habit of sparring with people, I still needed something that I can work for other than doing stance training. Initially, I was trying to make use of Zhang Xinbin's 白猿通背, but eventually I kind of come to a conclusion that there's some fundamental flaws with his version of 白猿通背. The power generation is very impressive, but he can only generate it when he's in a stationary step. The moment he stops moving around, or your opponent is moving around and trying to catch him in motion, his method of power generation just kind of falls apart. It's very hard to catch someone in motion with the way he generates power to require a very stationary foundation on your stance. So eventually I decided to just revert back to Yi Quan, because at that point I kind of realized that the Yi Quan training, or the Yi Quan approach to power generation, is more fluid and more agile, right? I mean, you still need to generate power from your foot, but instead of having a very solid stance, you can just tap the ground and the power comes up. And I also start to see the result, even though my master only taught me stance practice, but when I applied the stuff I got from stance practice into the Yi Quan stuff that I used to do, I can see that the result when I'm standing people or punching people, the result is a lot better than what I had back in the day when I was only training Yi Quan. And this further affirms that what I'm actually currently training at the time was exactly what I was missing when I couldn't progress in my Yi Quan training. And this is also around the same time that I started to take students again, after taking many years of break ever since I started working full-time in graphic design. And the main reason I started to take students, it wasn't for monetary benefit, but rather I kind of wanted at least a person who can be my training partner, right? Because stuff like push hand and sparring, you kind of need a regular partner. Obviously, training somebody from new is not as good as having somebody that's already well trained. But unfortunately, this is South Africa. There aren't that many people doing Chinese martial art, at least not many that are doing genuine Chinese martial art. So I had to basically grab a friend of mine, and then who was interested, and I basically had to train him from ground up until a point where he can be a sufficient training partner for me. And from there, it just kind of grew a bit by bit, and I got more students in. But I don't really advertise, and at the time I don't even have a proper venue, so the students that came to me are all from word of mouth, and people who knows me or knows or heard about me from some other friend. Now in the past, I basically tried out many different styles, or pretty much all the major styles that that you can find in Beijing, and even some that are not in Beijing in other provinces and cities. And that's because at the time I'm not really sure what I'm looking for. I know that I'm looking for Chinese martial art that has the base combat skill, but I don't really exactly know what that entails. Hence, I was basically trying out all kind of stuff. And like I was saying, when I hit 30 and I reflect upon my Yi Quan teacher, who what kind of skill he had when he was 30 years old compared to what I had at the time when I'm 30, I kind of realized I wasted a lot of time doing a lot of stuff, but I didn't focus all my effort into mastering one style that is clearly better than most of the other styles. Now, obviously, there are people who believe that all styles are equal, there's no better style, only better practitioner. That statement is only partially true. I am going to have another dedicated video just talking about that topic. But for me, clearly there are some styles that are better designed, developed, or refined than other styles. So there are differences when it comes to which style is better and which style is not as good. But obviously, if you don't train hard, then no style is good. And even when I found my Taiji teacher, at the time, I know that he has a much higher level than anyone else I've met at the time. But the method he's teaching and the stuff that we do in our lineage is very strange and obscure, and unless you reach the first breaking point, like you reach the first breakthrough, you don't really know what you're doing. So that is why even then I was still pretty much looking around into other internal martial art lineages and styles to see what other people are doing. But when I start to finally make that first breakthrough and finally understand what he means by skeletal force, bone force, and all of that, then the more I practice, the more confident I have within my own lineage and style, and the less desire to look into what other people are doing. Because finally I can finally grasp, not in a theory or a conceptual point of view, but physically in my training, in my own body, I finally understood what internal martial art was training, what it's all about. And at that point, I no longer are interested in what other people are doing. So after 2014, I went back again, actually 2015, which further consolidated my understanding on the skeletal force. And in 2016, and actually I went back again. And besides training with my master and my Taiji brothers, I also then spent time going through various parks and checking out what other people are doing. And this time it's not to to try to get better ideas or see what other styles are out there. I'm just trying to test my skill and start to engage people again in whether it's push hand or sparring. And especially when someone is bragging or talking nonsense about their style and pretending they're really good, then I will basically cross hand with them to prove that they are not that good or they're just talking nonsense. And naturally, most of the people within the Chinese martial art community, they're not that dedicated into their craft, right? Because whether they have day job or they have family to take care of, or another reason, most of them they're just doing this for a hobby. They're not as serious as I am, so they naturally don't put in the effort, and naturally they're not as well trained. So at the time I was feeling pretty good about myself, and again I started calling up my friends from the past, and I met up with Zhang Ming again and Zhuge Yi, and we sat together, we had coffee in Starbucks, which is a popular thing in China these days. And they were actually quite surprised to learn that I turned completely internal. They actually saw that my Shaobei style was already extremely good. They don't understand why I decided to drop Shaobei and take on an internal style. And naturally I explained to them that it's because I'm seeking for something higher and something with more destructive power. Shaobei, while it's good in concept, it just simply lacks the type of destructive power that internal style has to offer. I also learned that Zhang Ming is also training pretty hard and is taking over some of the classes that his master has no time to teach. And also through him got to meet another very prominent disciple of his master, right? The Song style master that we talked about in the previous video, Zhang Zengji. I also got to meet one of his other very prominent disciple who at the time was the highest level disciple out of all of them, even better trained than Zhang Ming. We also sat down, had tea, and we discussed about the similarities and difference between Song style Xingyi and my lineage of Taiji. And and while we were having tea, Zhang Ming also then confessed why he never offered to take me to his master all these years. It's actually because he's afraid that I might challenge his master, which is something that he doesn't wish to see. And obviously, naturally, I assured him that I don't do that to friends. I only do that to people I don't know. Not that he thinks I am better than his master, but among my friends, I am known for crossing hands with people and issuing challenges, so he didn't want to risk it because it would just turn into a very awkward situation for him, no matter who comes on top. But after that, I confirmed with him that I wouldn't do that to him. He was going to schedule us to meet, but unfortunately, during that period in Beijing, our schedule just couldn't align properly, so I haven't got to meet his master yet. But due to conflict of schedules, I didn't actually get to meet his master that year during my trip. So I gotta say, at that time, I was feeling pretty great about my training and my progress, and and the knowledge I'm starting to understand about the skeletal structure and forces. And just like how life generally goes, when you're feeling good about yourself, there's always going to be something that's going to, put you down and put you back to your place. And that happened in the form of one day I was training with my Taiji brother, Zhang Wei. And then he told me that he got a friend who owns a tea house in Peru Bamboo Park. It's like a lady. And this lady just invited a Wudang master from the Wudang mountain, a disciple of Zhong Yunlong, who is considered currently the top master on the Wudang mountain, right? And and has very high praise about this person. And Zhang Wei asked me if I want to go have a look. And there's like a slight story around this tea house owner, right? Her name is Li Meng. She used to be a student of my Taiji master. I've actually met her before, back in 2008 when I was first time when I went to train under my Taiji teacher at the time. So in 2014, I basically heard that this lady Li Meng has quit our lineage, left my master, and joined another Taiji master called Wang Hong'e, who is a grand disciple, meaning that Wang Hong'e's master was a disciple of Wang Peisheng, whom was a very prominent and highly respected internal master during his days among the Beijing Chinese martial arts scene. I'm actually friends with some of the members of his lineage, but the people I'm connected to are not associated with this Wang Hong'e, whom this lady Li Meng became a student of after leaving my master. And the reason she did that was because she thinks that my master's Taiji is not combat applicable, and that Wang Hong'e's one is. And obviously in the traditional Chinese martial art world, this is like a big kind of insult. But my Taiji master, he doesn't care about these customs, so he actually did nothing. He felt a bit disappointed that she didn't continue training because he had high hope for her. She's kind of talented. I think that was the case. So he just kind of felt, oh, it's too bad that she left because she could have, progressed much further. But he didn't get offended by this whole scenario. However, and neither were any of my other Taiji brothers, because none of them are actually from the Chinese martial arts circle, right? A lot of them are actually musicians. They part of bands or other kind of music industry, sound engineer, people who compose music. So they don't actually know the custom of the traditional Chinese martial art world, and they don't have that kind of ego, shall I say. But naturally, I'm different. So I've always remembered this Wang Hong'e, and I wanted to one day to visit this guy to prove that my Taiji master's Taiji is not inferior, and it's in fact going to be better than his. However, upon further inquiry, I discovered that this Wang Hong'e is pretty old already. So unfortunately, I had to give up the notion of crossing hands with him, because beating up an old man doesn't prove anything. However, I've always had this lady, Li Meng, at the back of my head, and was waiting for an opportunity to prove her wrong and make her lose face. So when my Taiji brother Zhang Wei told me about this lady inviting a Wudang guy, because apparently she's also now studying stuff from Wudang under Zhong Yunlong, or one of their students. So naturally, I had an axe to grind and a point to prove. So I said, sure, let's go visit her and check out this Wudang guy. So we went to the tea house. We sat down. We had tea, and this Wudang guy then starting to ask, what my Taiji brother does, because obviously when she introduced, she's like, this is Zhang Wei, and this is his junior Taiji brother. And obviously in the Chinese custom, if you're junior, they naturally assume you're not as good as a senior, because that's usually how it goes, right? If you join the lineage earlier, your training is better. But naturally, they don't know that I had many years of Chinese martial art background before I joined my Taiji master. So naturally, that guy started addressing my Taiji brother, Zhang Wei, starting to ask, what do you do? And then, and Zhang Wei being a musician, he's actually the lead singer of his band. He doesn't actually know the custom and the rules of the traditional Chinese martial art world, so he was like, we just stand and we do Wuji stance. We don't do anything else, because we still at the beginning stage of our training. And the guy is like, oh, how long have you been training? He said, I've been training for many years. And he's like, and you guys just stand around, you don't have forms, you don't do this gong, this exercise, that exercise. And he started basically to brag about all the stuff that they teach at Wudang Mountain. And naturally, my Taiji brother, Zhang Wei, he didn't really pick this up, right? He didn't actually know the customs of the traditional martial art world. But at that point, I got pretty upset. So I said, wow, you seem to know so much. So do you know push hand? And then he said, yeah, he know push hand. I said, well, let's push hand. And he's like, and I said, if you don't want to push hand, you can also do sparring. It's up to you. So I was partially upset by what he was, bragging to my Taiji brother and pretty much disrespecting him. Partially also because I wanted to prove to that lady, Li Meng, that my Taiji master's Taiji isn't inferior or has no combat ability. It's just that my Taiji master don't care about combat, so therefore he doesn't actually put much effort. He doesn't actually put his sword into it. But the stuff that he teaches, if you intend to make into a combat-oriented ability, it most definitely can. So that guy started to dodge a question, and he doesn't want to actually do it. So I keep pushing him verbally, of course, escalate the conversation. Eventually, he got up and he went into the back of the tea house, and then I started smiling, to that lady, like a very condescending smile, like the guy you brought from Wudang is bad, it's pretty suck. And naturally, she was pretty upset about it, and then she also got up and went into the tea house. And then she went in and made a phone call. She came out and then said that, do you guys want to go meet somebody interesting? And at the time, I already know exactly what's going to happen. This is how the Chinese martial art world works. She lost her face because of me, and therefore she want to gain her face back by finding somebody else to teach me a lesson. And I'm perfectly fine with that. Because at the time, I'm pretty confident that I'm able to deal with most of the people within the Chinese martial art community. So we got in my Taiji brother's car, and then we drove to a pretty far place called Qinglongqiao, the Black Dragon Bridge. And then she made a phone call, and then someone came down. And out of respect, we basically offered to take him to dinner first, because it's around 7 o'clock already in China. Eating is a big thing, so if you visit someone during food hour, you have to, go eat food first. So we went to a place close by, and we had hot pot. And obviously the first thing you do when you meet another martial artist is to figure out what he's capable of. And the first thing you do to figure out what he's capable of is to basically understand what style he does, right? So I asked, what style do you do? And that gentleman say he does 通背, 五行通背. So I said, okay, that's interesting. I also did 通背before. I did 八元通背. And then he's like, okay, so who did you study 八元通背 under? And then I say, well, I first studied under my dad, who had an old teacher back in Niujie, the Muslim street in Beijing. When he was really young, he no longer remember exactly the name of that master. He was like 11 years old when he did Baiyan Tongbei. I said, but then later on, I also studied under this teacher called Zhang Xinbin. And then the guy in front of me started laughing. He's like, oh, right, I know Zhang Xinbin quite well. And I started to feel like, okay, it's a really small world. So I said, how did you know Zhang Xinbin? And then he said, did you know Zhang Xinbin switched over to 五行通背? And this suddenly clicked, right? Because like I mentioned earlier in this video, both Boris's 戳脚翻子 master, Hong Zhitian, as well as that other boxing plus 通背 practitioner, Ma Yunfang, right? They both told me that Zhang Xinbin switched over to 五行通背, which at the time I thought was really strange. And at that moment, everything clicked. I was like, so this is the person that probably caused him to switch. So I then asked, I say, yeah, I heard about that. I don't understand why, so I haven't spoken to him for years. So I don't actually know why he switched. It's a very odd thing in the traditional martial art world, especially when you're already accomplished and the famous representative of your lineage to suddenly switch to another style. That's just really rare. So I say, so what happened? So he told me, I think it was around the year 2007, Zhang Xinbin invited this gentleman, Chong De-shun, over to his place and asked for a friendly exchange or a cross-hand sparring. And during the contest, Chong De-shun first asked Zhang Xinbin to initiate, right? For those of you that don't know, there are actually dueling etiquettes within traditional Chinese martial art. I'm not sure how this is in other provinces or cities, but within the Beijing region of the martial art circle, the etiquette of dueling basically works like this. When you agree for a duel, there are either 文 or 武. In some places, 文 means you verbally try to see who's better, who's more knowledgeable. 武 means you cross hand. In Beijing, that's not the case. 文 basically means that you spar with 3 moves or 3 attempts, and if one of the person lost, then basically the victory has been determined. And if the one guy made 3 attempts all got neutralized, then it's the other guy's turn. And if his 3 attempts also got neutralized, then it's considered a draw. So this is basically how we consider a civilized duel. And the uncivilized wu is basically when you just fight out and see whoever drops or concede or continue. Usually we don't do that because people end up getting hurt, and it's not really worth it unless there's like a grudge between these two parties. So usually we take the win approach, the civilized approach. So that's what happened on that day. And then Chong De-shun was very confident, so he let Zhang Xinbin make 3 attempts first. Zhang Xinbin made 3 attempts and all got neutralized on the first move. And then Zhang Xinbin is like, okay, it's your turn. And then this gentleman, Chong De-shun, made 1 move and completely shattered Zhang Xinbin's world, shall I say. He was actually defenseless when Chong De-shun made his move and he lost instantaneously. And it's not like a loss where you kind of say, I made a mistake. If I'm more careful, or I know about it, next time I'll do better. The victory was so one-sided that it basically shattered Zhang Xinbin's understanding to Chinese martial arts. Usually, for example, if I lost a duel to someone, but I know that we are of similar level, I just was less lucky, or I made the wrong choice, or whatever the other reason can be, I know that if I do another duel with him, I'm probably gonna win, or if we do 10, we'll basically be split even, right? But there's also time where you meet somebody, you have a duel, like what happened when I met that Yiquan master, Wang Yanglao 老师. The skill gap is so big that you know that you can have 100 duel and you lose 100 times. So in cases like that, you basically realize that you have no hope of winning against this guy unless you go back and try a lot harder and reach another level. So that's basically what Zhang Xinbin felt like at the time when he dueled against Chong De-shun, which is why after that he eventually decided he wanted to learn from Chong De-shun. But Chong De-shun refused to teach him because they are of similar age. He was being nice. He said, don't learn from me. Instead, you should learn from my eldest Tongbei brother, who's called Master Zhang Fushun. Master Zhang Fushun at the time was already in his 70s, and then Zhang Xinbin is in his 50s, so that will naturally be a better relationship rather than someone in his 50s learning from someone else in their 50s. That makes it look bad within the martial art community, right? In China, we care a lot about face or the appearance of things. So it's not a very good thing to your face to learn from somebody that is similar age to you. So eventually, Chong De-shun made introduction to Zhang Xinbin to meet with his elder Tongbei brother, and that's how eventually Zhang Xinbin basically did the Baishi ceremony and then became a disciple of Wuxing Tongbei. So after he told me that story, on a dinner table, I already know that this gentleman in front of me completely outclasses me. Because I know what kind of level Zhang Xinbin's at. And although at the time I don't think I was better than Zhang Xinbin, but whatever he does is no longer magical to me, shall I say. So I can understand what he does, and I don't think what he does is as high level as my own Taiji master, and therefore if I train with sufficient amount of time, I'll definitely overtake what he's able to do. However, if this person beat him in just one simple move, well, that completely and shattered his whole worldview on Chinese martial arts to a point where he's willing to join their style. That completely outclasses what I'm capable of. But even then, of course, I traveled all this way here already, and there's that lady there as well. So obviously, I'm not gonna back down. So after we had dinner together, we went back to his apartment. And then obviously, during introduction, she also says that Zhang Wei is my elder Taiji brother. I'm the younger one. So naturally, he also thinks that he is better trained. So he wanted to show stuff with him. But obviously, my Taiji brother Zhang Wei doesn't actually fight. He's a musician. He only does Taiji for spiritual fulfillment. So I stopped it. I said, he didn't actually do the stuff. I do it. So, and I'm the one that, she wanted to teach a lesson on. So I also wanted to experience what you're able to do, because from a conversation, it sounds like you are leagues ahead of my understanding, but I want to actually feel that. So we also followed the dueling etiquette because I'm younger and also less trained, and I'm given the right to make an attempt first, and he's going to be on the defense. And the first thing that struck me is that this gentleman didn't have a combat stance. But everyone that I've met up to that point, they have a combat stance. Whether they have the classical boxing stance, or they have Xingyi stance, some of them, or whatever. Like in Yiquan, we like to have a stance like this, where we hold our hand like the Yiquan stance, and we work from there. And the good thing about people having a stance is that it's almost like giving me a handle to work with, right? Somebody hold out his arm, all I have to do is go forward, apply some force, and then naturally the person would want to resist, or you're gonna try to pull away. If he pulls away, I go in further and attack. If he resists, I use that as a handle to break his structure. That's the whole center concept of Yiquan when it comes to sparring. And whenever people hold out their hand, I know exactly what to do. Obviously, when I make somebody better, like Wang Yang 老师, when I try to break his structure, he break mine instead and throw me onto his bed. But if my structure is better, then I usually will be able to win. But the issue I had with this gentleman is that his hand was just down by his side of his leg. He was standing just casually, he had his steps slightly one forward, one back, but his arm was just down by the side of his leg. And suddenly, I don't know what to do because there's nothing to work with, right? I like to grab onto, not like joint locking, but I like to apply force to the limb. Because then once I touch the hand or forearm, I have a good sense of exactly where his body distribution is at. If he's about to kick, he's about to punch with the other hand, I can feel it from just touching his forearm. But with this person, I can't determine anything because I can't get hold of his arm. So the only thing that I'm left to do is to attack first. But I don't know what he's capable of, so I tried to taste the water. I went in with a forward punch from Yiquan, right? So here, and I tried to punch him like that. And as I went in for the punch, his arm cut down like this and hit me right on my forearm. And at that moment, I heard this massive sound in my ear, almost reminiscent of when my Yiquan teacher back in the days, when I first met him, punched me on the side of my chest here. I heard a massive sound, my head was dazed, but furthermore, my entire arm was numb all the way up to my neck. So this whole line was completely numb. And I feel like something yanked my neck so hard that it was like tingling from around this area. I basically was disorientated and lost focus for at least a couple of seconds, and then after that my arm was numb for a couple of minutes. And I was really surprised. I did not expect this to happen. I knew he gonna outleague me because what he did was 张景斌, but I didn't expect this kind of power. It was just mind-blowing. And obviously, when you lose, you admit it. So I say, well, you're leagues ahead of me, and considering that I studied under Zhang Qingbin, who studied under your eldest Tongbei brother, that actually makes you 2 generations higher than me. And so there's no shame in losing to somebody this well trained and of a higher generation. So I gave him my praise and his due respect. And he said, oh, no, not yet. Let me make an attempt and see if you can stop me. And the other time I know, he was just gonna show off a bit, which is fine. You got to let the gentleman have his fun. So he made an attempt, which is a 单手, right? Which is a very typical basic Tongbei move where your hand goes like this and you flick it out. And I know this move. I've been doing it since day one when I did Tongbei. So one of the fundamental exercises that we do. So he came in, he did a 单手, and naturally my hand went out to stop it. And I was expecting him to change because that's what Tongbei people do. When the 单手 is a very soft, whoopee-like move. So usually when somebody blocks here, you try to go with the palm underneath, or you do like a hook, or you do something else, right? This is like a bait. You bait here, and then you attack somebody somewhere else. So that was not what I was expecting. So I'm expecting to have my structure block 单手, and then when he comes under something, I'm gonna apply force and then try to break his structure. Again, to my surprise, he did 单手. I contacted him, and he suddenly yanked the force downwards. He didn't attack from another angle or another direction. He went and broke my structure. At that split moment, I felt exactly how I felt when I was, back in the day training with my Yiquan teacher, or when my Taiji master was demonstrating his skeletal force. It was basically no struggle at all. The moment he contacted and applied force, my whole body got yanked forward. I was tiptoeing and my head tilted forward. So he did 单手, and at that moment, his second hand was already placing on my face, but he didn't hit me, just simply placed it there. and then the hand that went down became a punch to my ribs or solar plexus. I can't remember where it was because I was so shocked with the initial pull that he applied to my structure. So at that time, I started to think to myself, so this person are able to generate so much structural force, at least the same quantity as my Yiquan teacher, if not more. I can't really measure exactly, but I know it had the same amount of effect on me. But do bear in mind that back in 2003, I had no structure training, so it probably should be, by logic, easier for my Yiquan teacher back then to break my structure. But ever since then, I've been training Yiquan for a couple of years, and then when I met him, I did dedicated Taiji training for over 2 years every day, and has felt pretty good about my skeletal force. So for him to break my structure in 2016, it should demonstrate a higher amount of ability than what my Yiquan teacher did back in 2003. So after that, there's nothing more to show, and then naturally he wanted to show me some more moves. But that was no longer a contest. I basically just feed him a hand to see what he was able to do, because I don't want to suddenly upset him and get hit and get hurt, because I already lost, right? Not only do I want to get hurt, it's also considered bad etiquette to try to hit somebody after the duel has already been concluded. And after he had his fun, we sat down, we had tea, we discussed about martial arts, mainly about his lineage and also his experience in the Chinese martial art community, what kind of people he have met in the past, what kind of people he have defeated in duels. And then I realized that he's actually defeated so many people within the Chinese martial arts scene, mostly in Beijing, but he's also traveled to other provinces and beat people from other provinces. So he's been doing this for a very long time, and it's quite possibly one of the best traditional Chinese martial art fighters that are currently still alive. We chatted to about 1 o'clock in the morning, then I went back, and I couldn't help but to think about, this experience and how I could actually win against somebody who does this, right? Because from my Yiquan habit, I always want the person to have his arm out so I can use it as a handle to control them. But there's nothing I can do when the person hand is on his side. I can't even predict where he's gonna strike me, where his hand gonna come from, right? If you hold your hand up, there's only so many directions your hand can apply, and it is limited to the position of your elbow and the position of your shoulder. When your hands are down on your side, his hand can literally come from any place, and in Tongbei there are basically ways to strike from the bottom, from the top, from the left, from the right. It's so hard to predict. And every time my arm collides with his arm, my structure breaks, my arm goes numb, I have this shock in my head. So the only way to win against something like this is to not contact with his forearm. But that's almost impossible unless I'm super fast. But the problem is he's extremely fast as well, so I don't think I can win by pure speed and be able to hit him before his arm touches my arm. So this was basically on the back of my head for almost a full month. I've been thinking of what I could do against somebody who does that. And at the end of the month, the conclusion is I just don't know. There's nothing I can do that I think can actually defeat this kind of fighting mode. So at the end of the month, I decided, if you can't beat something, you join them. So I contacted my Taiji brother and I asked for Li Meng's contact. And I basically contacted Li Meng and then I asked her for this gentleman Chong Deshun's contact detail. And I called and I said, I want to meet you again. I don't know what he was thinking. He might be thinking I wanted a rematch. But when I met him again, I said, your Tongbei is so amazing, and it basically completely shattered my view on what Tongbei was. Because back in the days I did Tongbei, and I've seen many practitioners in Tongbei, and also Tongbei was a style that focused on speed and agility and changing your direction of attack. But the attack itself is whoopee-like, and it doesn't hurt as much, right? You can basically sting somebody, but you can't break the structure. That's not something Tongbei is known for. And obviously, Zhang Xinbin used to fuse Yiquan with Tongbei in order to break your structure. But the problem was, Tongbei and Yiquan are not really compatible with one another, because Yiquan has a very structured motion, where Tongbei is very fluid. So when you try to merge the two, it becomes something that is neither this nor that, and it actually kind of it's almost like if you want to work north and south at the same time, you end up nowhere. So that's the problem, at least to me, right? I mean, if you study under Zhang Xinbin and you think his Tongbei is great, that's fine. This is just my opinion. This is not the universal truth. Just for my opinion, when I studied Tong Wei with Zhang Xinbin, the problem was, he stuck between having structure and the fluidity of Tong Bei, which is a problem. Like, it's hard to use his kind of structure power to hit people that is constantly moving around with agile footstep. Like if you meet up somebody who does boxing, it's very hard to catch up to his footstep while trying to generate the kind of power that Zhang Xinbin teaches. However, for some unknown reason at the time, this Wuxing Tong Bei it's the same fluidity as any other Tong Bei. It doesn't need structure, it doesn't hold stances, it doesn't need any particular shape to generate power. But for some reason, every time the power hits, it feels the same as what I got hit when I did each one. It's still that same solid internal structural power, but without having structure. So that was really strange to me. And I explained my feeling to 崇德顺老师 at the time already, right? When you learn from somebody, then they become your 老师, which means your teacher. And I said, so I really want to join your style if you allow. And he was very happy about it because, even though he has such a high level of skill, he's actually not very appreciated. He doesn't actually have students or disciples in Beijing. While he has some disciples in another small city in Shandong province, he didn't actually get to see them much. So he was actually quite happy that I showed a great interest in his style. And then he basically taught me the first fundamental movement and told me that you gotta do this 2,000 times on the left, 2,000 times on the right. And then I said, sure. And I think at the time, he just thought, like everyone always says that, but they don't actually go back and do it. So but unlike other people, I went back and I didn't do 2,000 from the first day. I did like 500, and then 1,000. The next day, 1,500. The fourth day, I basically eased myself into 2,000. And then after a week, he WeChatted me to ask me, how was my training, and I told him, I've been doing 2,000. And then he asked me, the kind of feeling I have, like, where do I get pain, where do I feel sore, what does it feel on my shoulder, etc. And I told him my feeling, and that basically helped him to confirm that I did do it 2,000 times, right? Because if you tell your teacher you're gonna do it, but you don't, you won't have the same physical experience. And he was quite pleased that I actually a man of my word, and I actually do practice 2,000 times because it's actually quite hard. Not a lot of people is willing to put that much time. It's really boring. You repeat one movement 2,000 times on each side. It takes 2 hours. And now some of you might wonder, I did say to myself that I am not going to take up another style. I'm going to be just focusing in Tai Chi. So why did I decided to do Wuxing Tong Bei? Well, so beside the fact that his Tong Bei is very, very amazing, and and it kind of speaks to me because I started off my martial art journey with Tong Bei. But furthermore, I really admire his personality and the stuff he does, right? Because he's basically a better version of me. I like to walk around challenging people, and that's what exactly he does. But he does a lot better. He wins against more famous and well-trained people than I ever could. So he's like a role model to me, right? I have my highest respect for my Tai Chi master, but I don't really want to be like my Tai Chi master as a person, because he doesn't really care about fighting. He's all about spiritual enlightenment. He's a very chill person. People can swear in his face. He doesn't get angry, which is a good thing. I admire that kind of quality, but I don't want to be that kind of person. Rather, I want to be like Chong Lao Shi, right? Someone who put his fist where his mouth is, right? That's the kind of person I want to be like. So that's another reason why I decided to join him. And thirdly, is because this lineage of Tong Bei came from the great grandmaster Zhang Ce Ye, who studied under the Yang family, under Yang Banhou and Yang Jianhou for 10 years. So this Tong Bei is actually fused with Tai Chi. That's the final reason why I decided to join this lineage, because what he's teaching does not contradict to what I do in Tai Chi. In fact, it helps it, right? Because the fundamental practice is actually the same. The exercises are different, but we're training the same fundamental ability. So by doing this version of Tong Bei, actually helps me with my Tai Chi training. So that's the only reason why I decided to take on another style. But obviously, from that point onward, for me, it's just Tai Chi and Wuxing Tong Bei, and there's no room for anything else. So now here's a picture of my Wuxing Tong Bei master Chong De Shun. The reason we don't have a picture together is because every time I go to train with him, It's always just me and him, and I think it's disrespectful to take a selfie with your master. And I also wanted to wait for an opportunity that somebody else would be there and then take a picture for us, but unfortunately, the opportunity just never arose. And after I joined Wuxing Tongbei under Master Chong, when I'm mingling with other people from the Chinese martial arts circle, I actually started to hear more and more stories regarding my Wuxing Tongbei master. Now the reason I've actually never heard of these stories beforehand is because that nobody really likes to talk about stuff that makes themselves or the people they know look bad. But when I actually start to mention that I'm doing Wuxing Tongbei under this really high level master called Chong De Shun, then the stories start to come out. And from all the stories that I eventually gathered from other sources, it basically shows me that everything that Master Chong told me the first time we met in the restaurant was not exaggerated at all. He has certainly been around and have defeated many famous people within the community. And by famous, I don't mean governmental famous, not famous in terms of sport committee or on the internet or propaganda, but people who are well respected within the actual Chinese martial art community. For example, the master that I mentioned earlier, who taught Shaolin 五行八法拳 and wrestling and 八卦 and 形意, this master is called Sun Ruxian, who was one of the main instructors at the summer camp that my good friend Rene and his master Mark Matello was organizing. So this story was told me directly by Rene after I told him that I started practicing under Master Chong. So one day, after a full day of seminar at the summer camp, Rene, Zhang Xinbin, Sun Ruxian, and Master Chong, they sat down to have tea. And out of the blue, Master Chong asked if Sun Ruxian wanted to have a challenge match with him. And Sun Ruxian, who was considered one of the high-level masters in the summer camp, he did not stand up to accept the challenge, and he remained quiet for the rest of that entire gathering. And because of that, Rene told me that he feels that Master Chong is like a bandit. He just so randomly issue challenges to people, and it kind of makes things quite difficult because he knows that Sun Ruxian would not be able to win against Master Chong. But if he loses, it kind of makes him lose face in front of all the students at the summer camp, and kind of discredit him from ever teaching there again. So the only thing that could happen is basically him remaining quiet. But then then he loses face completely. So he actually felt that Master Chong was pretty unreasonable. But later on, when I spoke to Master Chong about this incident, he told me that it's because this Sun Ruxian disrespected one of his other Wuxing Tongbei brothers, and then that brother told him this guy's name and he remembered it, and that's why during that day when he met him, he remembered his name, and that's why he made it difficult for him. Something else that Master Chong was very well known for within the Tongbei community was that once, during a Wuxing Tongbei gathering in Xianghe, which is the birthplace of our great grandmaster Zhang Ce, the founder of our style, there was a gathering among all the Wuxing Tongbei branches, and the people at Xianghe, they were disrespectful to Master Chong's eldest Tongbei brother. So Master Chong went on stage and basically took the mic and swore at everyone from Xianghe. And those guys were obviously furious, and he said, you guys can come up and fight. And none of them stood up to the stage to fight him. And after that, he became a legend among the Tongbei community. And to some other people within the Chinese martial art community, Master Chong's name is almost like the boogeyman. You throw it out and you just want everybody shut up and become quiet. For example, I was mingling with some group of people who were boasting about themselves and boasting about their master. And the moment I throw Master Chong's name out, then all of them just stop talking about it. Because they know that this is a person that's crazy enough to meet any challenges, and he's good enough to win all of them. So they don't want to have any dealings with him. Now, I've met a lot of masters and practitioners in my journey through Chinese martial art. Many of them are considered high level, but I've never met a single master such as Master Chong, who majority of the people within the whole community avoid and do not want to cross hands with. And back in 2014, while I was visiting that Yiquan master, Wang Yang Lao Shi, who punched me and caused me a month of pain, he actually told me another interesting story at the time. We were talking about my martial art background, and I mentioned Zhang Xinbin, right, the Banyan Tongbei master. Then Wang Yang Lao Shi says that one of his disciples, called Ning Yi, at some point actually went to practice under Zhang Xinbin just to see, what it's all about. And over there was another student of Zhang Xinbin who was very annoying, and he pissed off Ning Yi. So Ning Yi had a fight with him, and he won. But obviously this now makes Zhang Xinbin look really bad. But given Zhang Xinbin's position, generation, and reputation, he can't just come out and fight Ning Yi, because that is considered bullying the young. So instead, he set a certain parameter, or almost like a rule or etiquette almost like a rule of engagement, that makes it less advantageous for him and more advantageous for Ning Yi. Now, I was not told the exact rule of engagement, but the result was that he underestimated Ning Yi, and he could not show dominance within that rules that he proposed. Now, obviously, this does not mean that Ning Yi is better than Zhang Xinbin. It just means that Zhang Xinbin underestimated Ning Yi and overestimated his own ability, and therefore the rules of engagement that he set gave too much advantage to Ning Yi, which is why he could not accomplish the goal and to show dominance. But obviously, Ning Yi also did not win against him. He was just able to neutralize whatever he agreed to do against him. So naturally, this caused Zhang Xinbin to lose more face. So as a response, he contacted somewhere else to help him with this situation. And as you might have guessed, the people that he went to are basically someone from my Wuxing Tongbei lineage. But unfortunately, back in 2014, I didn't know about this whole lineage yet. So I don't know who exactly Zhang Xinbin called. But the name of the person that Zhang Xinbin asked for help was passed on to Wang Yang Lao Shi through his student Ning Yi. And Wang Yang Lao Shi's response was that he told Ning Yi that, this guy is way beyond your league, you cannot win, so instead let's make peace. So he found someone that knew the other side as well, and then so he asked that guy to talk to the third party that Zhang Xinbin asked for help with, and eventually everybody came together, had dinner, and basically eased this entire situation over. So although I don't have confirmation that the person that Zhang Xinbin called was Master Chong, but if it is someone from my lineage, then most likely it would have been Master Chong, because he's the one that is most active when it comes to taking challenge matches. And this kind of shows you that even though the Chinese martial art community in Beijing is kind of big, but at the same time it's also kind of close-knit. Everyone that's important pretty much knows about everyone else. Now, there are many other verifiable exploits and incidents where my Wuxing Tongbei master Chong De-shun challenged other members of the Chinese martial art community. Many of those are well known and respected, and some are considered the top representatives of their lineage. But due to time constraint, I will not go into all of that in this video, but in the near future, I probably will be making a video just about my Wuxing Tongbei master and his adventure in the Chinese martial art world. Suffice to say, these few examples should give you an idea of what kind of a person and what kind of skill my Wuxing Tongbei master has. Hands down, he is the most badass Chinese martial art master I have ever come across in my entire journey in Chinese martial art up to this point. 2017, 2018, I went back to China again. Now basically it takes 3 days out of the week, depending on Master Chong's availability. I'll go to his apartment in that small room, and I'll basically do my stuff, and he'll sit there, have tea, and then watch me and give feedbacks and critics. And then Wednesday, Saturday, and Sunday, I basically spend my days either with my Taiji master in his home, or we go to the Pro Bamboo Park when there's a public class, and I train there. And that's how I basically spend my 3 months in China from 2017 to 2018. And during this period, I still got to meet up with other fellow Chinese martial art practitioners. One particular person that was really interesting was a friend of mine called Yin Xin Zheng. He basically does Xingyi, Ba Gua, and Wuxing Tongbei. But his Wuxing Tongbei is not from my lineage, not from the great grandmaster Zhang Ce's lineage. Instead, it's from someone called Xiu Jianchi. which is a very strange thing because that lineage of Wu Xing Tong Bei does not relate to my lineage, but they both have the same name. So his lineage of Xingyi and Bagua is traced back to a very famous Xingyi Bagua master called Zhang Zhaodong, or also known as Zhang Zhankui, who was one of the very famous master from the Republic era, a Kung Fu brother to Xingyi master Li Cunyi. Now I've met a lot of Xingyi practitioners and a lot of Bagua practitioners, in my journeys to China each year, and most of them are not that good, right? So the ones that I consider good are, my friend from the Song lineage under Master Zhang Zengji, as well as my good friend Byron Jacob, who studied under Master Di Guoyong, right? They are pretty much the good Xingyi practitioners that I know from Beijing. And this friend of mine, Yin Xingzheng, is basically the third Xingyi practitioner that I consider really good. And his Bagua is also probably one of the best Baguas I've seen to date. Excluding Grandmaster Tianfang, who's in another level of internal understanding, but when it comes to combat ability and power generation, this friend of mine's Bagua is pretty up there out of all the people that I've met in my current age, right? He's similar age to me, so in this generation, he's really good. And through hanging out with him and talking about, trying to understand what he does, and he showed me, his Xingyi stance, what kind of basic concepts they go under. He showed me his Bagua concept. And then I was also chatting with some other friends, and at that time, from chatting with all of these friends, I started to see a pattern. Basically, they all do something similar without actually mentioning that particular thing that they do. But if I take all of these good practitioners' understanding, put them together and I try to find similarity, I can basically deduce that all these internal martial arts come down to 4 things, which is eventually how I got the idea of the 4 fundamental forces of internal martial art. And that's why I keep saying that these 4 forces can be found in all legit internal martial art, whether it is Xingyi, Bagua, Taiji, Yiquan, or even in Wu Xing Tong Bei. Even though Wu Xing Tong Bei does not talk about structure, but these 4 fundamental forces are still there. They just call it something else, or sometimes they don't talk about it specifically, but you do need to have it in order to generate this kind of power correctly. And from that point onwards, everything just clicked, and suddenly I can finally fully understand at least the skeletal force level, which is the entry level of all internal martial art. And I can finally understand why, Sun Lutang, one of the greatest practitioners of internal martial art in the Republic era, said that the 3 internal styles start from different paths, but eventually end to the same goal. And the little fact that you might not know is that when Sun Lutang declared the 3 internal martial arts, he was actually intended to declare 4, including Wu Xing Tong Bei. He's actually a sworn brother of my great grandmaster Zhang Ce, right, from the founder of our Wu Xing Tong Bei style. But eventually they had a fallout, and they stopped being friends with one another, and that's why Zhang Ce refused to join this collaboration, which is why eventually there was 3 internal martial arts rather than 4 internal styles. So the first 3 parts of this video is basically intended to prove my legitimacy and qualification in talking about various topics within the traditional Chinese martial art industry or circle, however you want to call it. This last video is more like an experience that I'm sharing with those of you out there who's also on the journey seeking authentic Chinese traditional martial art. I hope that my experience can give you some insight and experience on how the actual Chinese traditional martial arts community works. And any of you out there have any question regarding seeking authentic lineage or masters practitioners, always feel free to contact me and I'll definitely help you out as much as I can. So lastly, I would just like to reinforce this again, that I don't claim to be a high-level practitioner, but I do put my hand at where my mouth is, and I never shy away from any kind of do or challenge. I've got my face beaten by professional center athlete, right? How much worse can it get? I got hit by Yiquan master that causes me severe pain for a month. So nothing else really surprised me at this point. And my channel is never about boasting how good I am, because I always say that I'm not that good. I'm still a beginner in internal martial arts. However, my channel is here to debunk fraud and fake information and misinformation and disinformation when it comes to traditional Chinese martial art. And in doing so, I naturally would piss off various kind of people. And I really don't care if I piss off those people who I consider to be fake or fraud. And if you have a problem with that, then I guess this channel is just not for you and you just shouldn't watch it anymore. As for the rest of you, I hope you enjoyed this video and I hope that you find some of it at least to be useful or insightful. Got any questions or suggestions, constructive comments, please leave them in the comment below and I'll definitely get back to you. If you find my videos interesting and helpful, then please subscribe me on YouTube channel, and if you can support me on Patreon, that would be greatly appreciated. And as always, I'd like to give a shout out to all my Patreon supporters. Thank you guys so much for supporting me, especially through this pandemic. And for me, it's not just the monetary benefit, but also the fact that I know there are people out there who appreciate my videos, because I know my videos are not mainstream, commercial, or fast food based content for easy for people to digest, but rather piece of the truth and experience that I spent years to search for within the Chinese martial art community. So thank you all for your support. Thanks for watching TriEssence martial art channel. Stay safe, stay healthy, try to stay home if you can, and I'll see you next time.